Are you curious what limbic system dysfunction is? In this video, we are going to explain what the limbic system is and how the limbic system dysfunction develops. I'm Brooklyn Hanna.
And I'm Nick Hanna, and we are Christian brain rewiring coaches helping you reverse chronic symptoms with neuroplasticity and renewing of the mind for Christ. If you enjoy the content today, please consider subscribing to our channel and hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video every Tuesday.
So let's first talk briefly about what the limbic system is. The limbic system is a group of brain structures that are found deep beneath the cerebral cortex. The limbic system acts as a control center regulating all kinds of conscious and non-conscious functions. It is responsible for the mind-body connection in some ways. Therefore, people can get physical symptoms from an impaired limbic system. The limbic system activates our fight, flight, or freeze response when a perceived threat is present and can trigger negative physical responses such as symptoms and emotional responses such as fear.
The limbic system controls our emotions and is responsible for the formation of memories. And research has linked the limbic system to feelings of motivation, the fight, flight, or freeze response, hunger, and the production of hormones that help regulate our nervous system. Let's talk about 4 common structures of the limbic system: the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and cingulate gyrus. The amygdala is involved with the fear and anxiety. It responds to threats and sends a message to our body to trigger the stress hormones. This then causes physical symptoms of fight or flight. The hippocampus stores our memories. It connects emotions to our senses. Therefore, you may think of a past memory when you smell a certain scent. Fresh mowed grass reminds me of being a kid on the farm.
The hypothalamus regulates our hormones, body temperature, thirst, sleep-wake cycle, sex drive, and more. It is the interface between the endocrine and nervous system. It responds to mental and emotional cues such as anger and pain and tells the pituitary to tell the adrenals to release stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. The cingulate gyrus regulates pain and emotions. It also plays a role in cognitive processes, focus, and attention. The cingulate gyrus is responsible for monitoring the body's response to unpleasant experiences. It is also involved with fear and predicts negative stimuli. Isn't it amazing that the limbic system does all of this? Now that we have discussed some of the structures of the limbic system, we will now move forward to how limbic system dysfunction develops. Limbic system dysfunction develops after someone has had multiple traumas and stressors during their lifetime. But here's the deal. It is not necessarily the stressors that were in their life that caused the limbic system dysfunction, but how their brain perceived the stressors. For example, 2 different kids could have had parents who got divorced. One kid may have spiraled into negative thinking patterns and taken it more hard and negative emotions, causing their limbic system to become dysfunctional. The other kid may have tolerated the divorce very well and went on with the rest of their life without having it affect them much.
So it is not necessarily always the external stressors or traumas that affect us. It's how we perceive and respond to them with our perspective on the situations. We are by no means saying the limbic system dysfunction is your fault, as many of us were not consciously aware of what we were doing and what was going on in our mind when we were younger. Maybe we just really didn't care. Furthermore, limbic system dysfunction can also develop from knowingly living in sin. When we sin, we open the door and can allow Satan to take control of our mind, and this can destroy the body. Limbic system impairment is a fear response, which is the opposite of faith. Fear is not from God, but from the enemy. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." So rest assured, God provides us with what we need. With the power of Christ and neuroplasticity, we can both prevent and reverse our brains and bodies from being negatively impacted by trauma and stress.
Limbic system dysfunction is a chronic maladapted stress response that occurs in the brain and then it affects the body. As many of you know, I was a health coach for many years, and where I saw many people go wrong is believing that their chronic symptoms such as brain fog, fatigue, pain, digestive issues, etc. are from one stressor alone. By one stressor, I mean something in the environment such as mold or some type of infection such as a tick bite or a virus. These things may have affected you, but they likely are not the main reason you have symptoms. Someone with a healthy limbic system can get an infection, for example, and bounce back. They can tolerate a variety of foods without symptoms. They can go down a chemical aisle at the grocery store and be around cell phones with no symptoms.
The problem is not always the environment. If it was, then everyone would be sick. We believe the cause of chronic symptoms is a maladapted stress response in the brain. Once you balance the limbic system with neuroplasticity tools and techniques,
And Jesus.
that's right, you will be able to tolerate the things in the environment like you once were able to and like people who don't have limbic system dysfunction can. When people believe it is just one toxin in the environment or one infection, they often chase that for many months or even years. For example, they believe it is all Lyme and they try dozens of protocols and put all their hope in the supplements. Then after many attempts to address Lyme, it may lead to mold or EMF or Bartonella and so on. If you have changed your diet and taken lots of supplements and still have lingering symptoms, you may want to work on balancing your limbic system. Don't fall victim to this vicious circle.
You know, I got sick right after I lived in a building that had toxic mold growing in it. I went to lots of doctors, both conventional and natural. For a few years, I believed that toxic mold was what made me sick. I chased protocols for years and spent tens of thousands of dollars on supplements and protocols. The problem was I still had many lingering symptoms because I had not yet balanced my limbic system. Where I was going wrong was believing that mold was the only cause to my symptoms. I found out I had the HLA gene and detox was going to be more difficult for me. I was, the worst case scenario, and I was told I had to work hard to detox this mold to get well. If mold was the only thing that made me sick, then why didn't I get sick when I was living in a 50-year-old house growing up? I mean, I know I was exposed to mold all the time when I was younger, but why didn't I get chronic symptoms until I was in my 20s? This is because I believe that it was not just the environment that was the problem for me, and it definitely wasn't just the gene. In fact, genes can actually be turned off. There's a concept called epigenetics, and it can be achieved through neuroplasticity techniques. So I don't believe it was just the mold. I believe my symptoms were caused from an accumulation of stressors throughout my life and how I perceived those stressors. Yes, I believe that mold affected my limbic system to a degree, but it was just the last thing that kind of overflowed my bucket. I now look at my life, especially right before I got sick, and see that I also had a lot of other stress going on right before that exposure. One being I studied 18 hours a day for nursing school. Now really looking back during that time, I can identify a ton of traumas and stressors that were rooted in my negative thinking patterns and ways I perceived what happened to me. Again, I studied like crazy. I was super competitive in nursing school. I drank too much in college. I had an eating disorder in high school. We had a lot of drama in our high school as well. I always took things so personally. I was addicted to exercise at one point. Don't get me wrong, running miles a day and working out at the gym isn't bad, but being overly obsessive and placing it above God can be destructive. I now see that I have tons and tons of patterns in my past that were all rooted in my thinking. I had some emotional traumas and stressors that I did not handle well. Usually there's a perfect storm of stressors and negative thinking patterns that lead up to limbic system dysfunction. It is typically not just the mold, the food, the EMF, or the chemicals. Once I finally realized this after years, I decided to go a different route and try brain rewiring with a Christian perspective. This has totally changed my life. I mean, sure, I felt okay and functioned somewhat by eating my 5 foods, avoiding EMF and all kinds of things in the environment, but I would just spiral right back downwards when I tried to live a normal life and slightly bend from my extremely restricted diet, not wear my EMF devices and not avoid certain buildings. So this is because my limbic system started seeing these things as a threat since I had avoided them for so long. So your brain will see anything as a threat if you continually avoid it, whether it's food, something in the environment, exercise, or a person. By retraining my brain, I eventually started feeling better than when I was avoiding everything, because my limbic system no longer perceived these things as a threat. So, the power of neuroplasticity is amazing, especially when you add Jesus to the center.
And this brings up a great point. Some say that you are wiring your brain to desensitize yourself, which is bad because you won't perceive danger, like mold for an example. Actually, what has happened is your limbic system has become overly sensitive to these things and reacts to even tiny bits of mold in the environment, when in reality, small to moderate amounts are not life-threatening. Rewiring your limbic system balances it so you are not hypersensitive to everything. A normal, healthy person can handle small to moderate amounts of toxins. So if you rewire, you are actually just getting back to your normal, healthy self where you don't react to anything. Brain rewiring is balancing and normalizing your limbic system, not desensitizing. It is all about having environmental awareness and using common sense. The problem is the limbic system. Now, do not take this to the extreme. We are certainly not telling you to live in a home covered in mold. We're not telling you to live directly under a cell phone tower. And we're certainly not telling you to eat fast food every day or food that you're clearly allergic to. Again, to recap, we are saying you can get back to where you once were before you were overly sensitive to these things.
You know what? I also realized I do not have to eat a restricted diet to be joyful in Christ. I looked at my life when I was younger and I was like, wow, I did not have to avoid anything and I was happy and healthy. Then I looked at people I look up to at church and I'm like, okay, my pastor is happy and healthy and he eats whatever he wants. So I realized that our body on earth is temporary anyways. So I had to completely change my perspective with brain rewiring from a Christian perspective, and it's completely changed my life, as I mentioned. I have learned to trust God with my physical health while I focus on renewing my mind. The power of our thoughts and how we perceive what happens to us in life is amazing. Perspective is everything.
So let's get into what happens if our limbic system stops functioning optimally. After you have developed this chronic maladapted stress response in the brain, several other bodily functions can go out of balance because, as we mentioned earlier, the limbic system controls many things throughout the body. Here are some systems that can go out of balance because of limbic system dysfunction: the autonomic nervous system, the sleep-wake cycle or circadian rhythm, the hormonal system, the adrenals, which regulate our stress hormones, metabolism, appetite, the immune system, emotional health such as anxiety, depression, mood instability, and a whole lot more.
So, there are many types of stressors, traumas, and trials that can happen to us in life. I think it's also important to realize that just because stressors happen to us doesn't mean that we will develop limbic system impairment. It is how our brain perceives those stressors. In other words, how did you cope with the things that happened to you? Some stressors are things that have happened to us and are out of our control, such as our parents getting divorced, someone yelling at you out of anger, death of a loved one, losing your job, financial hardship, physical injuries. Other stressors and behaviors we may have chosen to engage in, and these are backed by negative thinking patterns. So things such as alcohol or drug abuse, eating disorders, overworking, perfectionism, living in constant sin, treating others with anger.
We cannot always control what happens to us. The first stressors that we listed, such as losing your job or the death of a loved one, were completely unplanned, obviously. But the question that matters is, how did you handle these situations? Did you spiral into negative thinking patterns and emotions and stay there? Or did you control your thinking and emotions and give the trials to God? With brain retraining, you will learn how to control your thoughts and emotions about your trials and stressors in life. We are not telling you to suppress emotions. We acknowledge they're there and that they're real, but we don't stay in these negative thinking patterns. They can be toxic. When you continuously spiral into negative thinking patterns and emotions, you feed the stress response and make your symptoms worse. Now, the second stressors we mentioned were stressors that were rooted in negative thinking patterns that you could control. Again, these are things like alcohol abuse, overworking, or living in sin, such as watching pornography. In our Limbic System Rewire program, these are the thinking patterns and behaviors that we help you become aware of so you do not wire in negative neural pathways leading to the chronic stress response and worsening symptoms.
So, now that you have learned about the types of stressors that affect our limbic system, we will now talk about the symptoms associated with limbic system dysfunction. There are tons of symptoms due to limbic system dysfunction. This could be why so many people with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, or mold illness have so many different symptoms affecting so many different body systems. We believe that the root of most, if not all, chronic symptoms, the symptoms that are randomly all over your body, they come and go, and to get better or worse, is this maladapted stress response or limbic system dysfunction. We believe that's the root. Again, there are numerous symptoms related to limbic system dysfunction, but we'll just name some of them today. Sensitivity to light, sound, touch, smell, taste, EMF, foods, chemicals, supplements, or medications, brain fog, fatigue, headaches, lack of focus, memory problems, speech problems, anxiety, depression, PTSD, irritability, panic attacks, and mood swings, pain and discomfort, dizziness, lightheadedness, blood pressure and heart rate fluctuations, body temperature imbalances, digestive complaints such as constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas. And these are just some of the problems, but the limbic system causes autonomic nervous system dysfunction, which can cause all kinds of random symptoms that seem unrelated. Does this sound like you? Comment below. We love to hear from you guys. Well, we're here to tell you that you can absolutely reverse a dysfunctional limbic system by rewiring your brain for health and happiness. Woo! So I have personally gotten rid of all kinds of symptoms through neuroplasticity and Jesus alone. So symptoms such as brain fog, food sensitivities, breathing issues, digestive problems, and the list goes on. If I can, you can too.
If you are wondering if limbic system dysfunction is the root cause of your chronic symptoms, watch our video. Is limbic system dysfunction the root cause of your chronic symptoms? The card will be linked here. If you would like to have us help you rewire your brain and reverse your chronic symptoms with a Christian approach, click the link below and complete the form for a free call with one of our team members.
Otherwise, we do have a free Facebook group called Brain Rewiring for Health and Happiness. Join today to hear the best brain rewiring tips. The link is below. God bless.
And Godspeed.